So we are live here at 6 o'clock. This is Friendly Neighborhood History, and I am going to be bringing you history for the next hour about different topics that I find to be important. If you join, make sure to ask any questions you might have, make any comments. It's really good to have all the support. I really appreciate it. It really helps grow the channel. Any feedback you have, any topic ideas you have, I would just love to see them. Thank you so much for your support. We had some technical issues earlier, and now we are live and good to go, and I will be bringing you some history for the next hour. So if you hop in, say hi, make a comment or a question about history, and I would really love to hear you and talk with you and see you. It's always an honor to have so much support here at Friendly Neighborhood History, and we are over 3,700 strong now, and the amount of support, subscription, comments, feedbacks from people who know so much about history and who really care about good quality content and original content has been really inspiring and really good to see. Like I was saying, I started this channel back in February. It's been less than 6 months, and I feel like I've grown and learned a lot in that time. And I started it with the idea of spreading my love and passion of history and my knowledge about history out there. And I got, eventually I figured out that it was just more fun to do different videos with different ideas, and then to start doing themes and series, and give back to my subscribers, give them a chance to ask me something. Like, if they subscribed, I would do a video in their honor, and that offer still flies. If you subscribe to the channel, I will gladly do a video on a topic of your choice. All you have to do is let me know. It takes me a while to get to all of them, but I am doing the best I can. I've got a video coming out about King Baldwin IV, the King of Jerusalem, the famous leper king who somehow held back the greatest Islamic general maybe of all time, maybe the greatest general of all time, Saladin, in the 1180s until Baldwin's young death in 1185. So that's one I've got in the queue. I've got other subscription videos I'm doing. I'm also doing more full-length videos. Expect a full-length video to drop tomorrow. It's about the Berlin Congress, about how Europe divided Africa without Africa's consent at the height of the age of imperialism and racism, you could say, at the end of the 19th century. So I'm really looking forward to that. That should be a lot of fun. Doing that video, I'm releasing it tomorrow. Probably gonna drop it around 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, maybe a little bit later if I'm not able to, but that should be a lot of fun. But yeah, thank you for joining, and make sure to leave a comment and ask any questions you may have. I'm trying to get out new content, new videos. I just finished a series, a 1-minute video series I've been doing about the Crusades that I've really enjoyed doing. I'm in fact dropping a special bonus episode tonight about that, discussing some of the effects and the legacies and stereotypes and misconceptions about the Crusades. And I've covered, I had 4 videos on that covering the 4 major Crusades, and the 4th video also got into detail about some of the lesser known Crusades that happened later on. And so I really just enjoyed delving into European history. I delved into Middle Eastern history, learned a few things that I didn't know. A lot of focus is on the First and Third Crusade, for instance, so I learned more about the Second Crusade, and I really enjoyed learning about that, so that was a lot of fun. But yeah, the support for the channel, everything has been really great. I really enjoy it. I'm sorry it's boring. I'm going to get to some history in a couple of minutes. So a couple of topics that I want to discuss. The first one, obviously, is the breaking news. Obviously, former President Donald Trump, the Republican nominee for president, was shot and injured earlier today at a campaign rally in Pennsylvania. The gunman is dead, and one of the bystanders in the audience is also dead. That's huge breaking news, and it does relate to history because, interestingly enough, this is the first time in over 50 years a presidential candidate has been shot on the campaign trail. The last time this happened was in 1972 when George Wallace was shot. Back before then, in 1968, Robert Kennedy obviously was shot and killed. The last president, as Trump is a former president and very well might get elected, only the second president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. The last president to be shot was Ronald Reagan in 1981, early in his administration. He was very close to dying. And of course, the last president to be shot and killed in office was John F. Kennedy in 1963, very notoriously. In fact, 4 presidents have been assassinated. Lincoln was the first, followed 20 years later by James Garfield, followed 20 years again later by William McKinley, and then 60 years after that, in 1963, obviously JFK. So that's obviously huge news, and a lot of people are talking about the political implications, the news implications. President Biden and the opposition have called for civility and peace and an end to violence and political division in the country. And this is something that has been a huge issue in the last few years, and probably about the last decade of American politics. There's been a lot of diciness, a lot of contention, a lot of polarization. And as a historian, I can just say that that has happened many times in American history. And there are a lot of people who are wondering, when is this going to stop? When is this going to end? Well, I think from what I've seen when it comes to political division in this country, that it gets worse sometimes before it gets better. It's happened many times. Do I have lettuce in my teeth? Oh, geez. Hate when that happens. Anyways, so what's going to happen next? We don't exactly know. But I think that political division in this country has reached a heightened point. We're at a high point of polarization, and things are just going to may continue to get a little worse. But who knows? This could be a unifying effect. The former president is not badly wounded and is being checked out by medical teams as we speak. So hopefully nothing happens to him there. But anyways, yeah. So that obviously is huge news, and it's been a long time since a president was shot, and it's been a long time since the president died in office, and it's been a long time since a presidential candidate has been shot. And so this is kind of shocking and breaking to a lot of people, and may very well galvanize Trump's base, and may also serve to stop some of the polarization and bring unity to the country, and perhaps a blessing in disguise. And obviously, violence, any political violence of any sort, is completely unacceptable in any context. So that's the latest going on there. Some other topics I wanted to discuss, I wanted to get to it last week, was the French Revolution. It's been on my mind a lot. I just actually set up my first social media profile. I set one up on Facebook. I'm going to be setting up one on Instagram, but it was of Lady Leading the People, which is a really famous Jacques-Louis David painting of the French Revolution back from the, I believe he drew it in the 1820s, kind of looking back to the French Revolution. And the influence of the French Revolution on the way we view politics and government is just so influential and so consequential. And tomorrow, interestingly enough, is a huge milestone in the French Revolution, and many may consider it the day the French Revolution actually started. It might be the anniversary, and that is Bastille Day. And of course, in my Today in History video tomorrow, I'll be talking about that. Still dropping those every day. Also trying to drop my 5 and 15 videos every day as well, but haven't been as consistent there. But anyways, so Bastille Day is coming up, and that starts a couple of weeks after what's known as the Tennis Court Oath. Basically, let me reverse a little bit. The French Revolution really is caused by the American Revolution. The French got involved in the American Revolution by in a desire to undermine Britain, who had defeated France several years earlier in the French and Indian War and had taken its American colonies, including what is now the American Midwest, as well as huge parts of Canada, which is why a significant portion of the Canadian population to this day speaks French. It's why we have French influences in places like Louisiana and different parts of the Midwest. Of course, Louisiana being in the South. At the same time, the French actually, so the French, in order to help the Americans defeat the British, they sent soldiers, they sent ships, they sent weapons, as did the Spanish. But the French bankrupted themselves, and in bankrupting themselves, their economy was clearly backwards. They were still depending on a very feudalistic system, and their king had way too much power, and he relied on the 3 different estates. Name a car. Name a car. A Ford. There. Anyways, so the French king relied on the 3 estates to help support his government, and this was an old feudal system which had the king at the top with his nobles, the first estate, the second estate being the clergy, the church, which had a huge amount of influence, the Roman Catholic Church in France, and then the third estate. And the third estate comprised everybody else, from merchants, businessmen, middle-class people. Okay, really do a better one. Okay. Let's see. A 1965 Ford Thunderbird. There, we'll keep it with Ford. So the French king had these three estates that were supposed to help him govern and help him make the decisions about what was best to do for the French people, and the nobles and the clergy relatively sided with the king, and the third estate represented business people, they represented merchants, and they represented some of the wealthier people of France who made their wealth on their own but were not of noble birth or ranking. And they represented the poorest of farmers who were really struggling in the bad economy. And when famine hit, a lot of people were starving in the countryside and even in the Paris slums and in the slums of other cities. And so France really was struggling, despite the fact that it was one of Europe's most populous countries and had a very strong economy and many natural resources. The French economy was really in the tanker in the 1780s, and Louis XIV calls the three estates together. It's called the Estates Generales, to meet and discuss the problems, and he is worried that they will seek to undermine his power, and he's not really keen on that. So eventually what they do instead is he's really concerned especially about the third estate, because he knows the church and the nobility are probably going to be loyal to him because they depend on him for legitimizing their religious beliefs and their noble titles and wealth respectively. So he actually locks out the third estate from the palace where they are meeting. And the third estate, which is again businessmen, representatives of peasants and merchants and artisans all throughout all of France, they go across the street to a local tennis court, and on, I believe it's June 30th, 1789, they sign the tennis court oath. And some people think this is the day that the French Revolution actually starts. And this creates a national assembly representing the people and their interests, not the interests of the king, not the interests of the nobles, not the interests of the church, but promises to form a government that is focused for the people, and that they continue to meet until they can finally have a constitution and have a new form of government. And this is where I want to say that the French Revolution, from this point out, is not just going to be one group of people clearly having a particular viewpoint or background. It's going to be different people with different ideas. There are some who want to keep a king but limit his power. There are some who want to do away with the king and create different tiered governments. There are some who have affinities for the Catholic Church, and some who want to completely strip the church of its power. The most radical element of the French Revolution and the revolutionary government in the National Assembly becomes known as the Jacobins, and they create the Committee of Public Safety, led by a certain Maximilien Robespierre, who, along with many others, is hell-bent on getting rid of the old order, destroying the old order, punishing the old order. This means the nobility, this means the clergy, the church. The church loses its power and its positioning. They also, of course, target the king and others, and eventually, of course, they kill the king and his Austrian wife, Marie Antoinette. But we'll get there in a minute. So I'm getting ahead of myself. Next, basically, they managed to get the support of most of the peasantry and most of the, again, the third estate. And the king decides to run away, and he tries to run away to Austria, where his wife's brother is the emperor, and where he thinks him and his wife and his family will be safe. However, he is caught and taken back to Paris by the revolutionaries, and eventually the king is beheaded along with his wife for not supporting the revolution and for oppressing the people. The revolutionaries, at this point, the French monarchy has lost all of its power and is ended temporarily. It's going to be back in the 1800s, on and off, and really it's not until the late 1800s that there's no more monarchs and no more emperors in France. But with the king being out of the picture, the National Assembly is able to form a new government. Again, they strip the church of the power. They create their own version of the Declaration of Independence called the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, which basically gives gives power to the individual. And this is where the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity, which underline the French government to this day, really start to emerge. And basically, the whole of the French government is based on Enlightenment philosophy and Enlightenment thinking that will promote, the First Republic will promote individual rights, liberty, freedom of speech, freedom of press, things of that nature, rather than being ruled over by either God or a king or the nobility or the church. People will be ruled over by their own reason, and reason will win the day. So in order to strip the French society of its old traces, they create a new calendar, which is based on what they think are reasonable measures. They, of course, create a new government that they believe is reasonable, based on the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. And while this is happening, you have more radical elements like the Jacobins calling not just for political change, but but also for blood. And they want things to really get violent. And not only do they kill the king and his wife, but they also kill former nobility. I'm talking right now about the French Revolution. It's just a topic off my head. But if you have a particular historical topic you want me to cover, leave a question. This is a Q&A. Ask me anything you would like. So they not only kill the king, they not only kill his wife, but they also kill a lot of the old nobility. They strip the church of its power. And they don't outright go after the church as much as they do the nobility. They're not killing church officials and prelates. They don't want to go that far, but they are trying to secularize France. At the same time, the Committee of Public Safety and the Jacobins, especially Robespierre, start targeting people that they believe are enemies of the revolution. So this begins what's called the Reign of Terror in 1793 to 1794, where they are actually hunting down not just nobles and clergy members, but people who have been part of the National Assembly, members of the Third Estate, representatives of the French Revolution. Yes, I am a historian, as much as I can be. So the Committee of Public Safety during the Reign of Terror is hunting down anyone who they believe is the French Revolution. We're talking about the French Revolution. The Committee of Public Safety is hunting down anyone who they think is an enemy of the revolution, and they are putting them on trial. They are, so they are violently persecuting anyone who they believe is an enemy of the revolution and who is actually going to be causing problems. And thousands of people die, and they use torture devices, especially the guillotine. And we've seen the picture of this, and it's a new device, and they pull a lever, and a rope, and a blade comes down and it decapitates the person. And this is used on tons of enemies of the revolution, and Robespierre clearly has become the most powerful and feared member of the Revolutionary Guard until he himself is declared by the Committee of Public Safety to be an enemy of the revolution. He is actually apprehended, and when they apprehend him, they shoot him. I can talk about Alcatraz a little bit. Give me 1 second. But anyways, so he's shot. So they capture Robespierre, but they actually shoot him. And but because they're a reasonable people who follow the rights of man and follow rule of law and trial by jury, they put him on trial, and he's sitting there screaming out in agony with a gunshot wound in his throat or his neck, or his mouth actually. And they're having a trial. They're trying to be as civil as possible during the midst of this man's agony and suffering. And they put him on trial, convict him as an enemy of the state, and they also behead him. And at this point, it's clear that it's gone way too far. The man who was this feared leader of the French Revolution has now actually been killed by the very same committee in the very same fear and suspicion and paranoia that he had helped create. Because if you say you are an enemy of if you say you are declaring who the enemies of the revolution are, be careful, because you can easily be declared an enemy of the revolution. And that's just what happened to Robespierre. And this happens in many cases. During Stalin's purges in the 1930s in the Soviet Union, most of the people that Stalin targeted and killed, and as well as their families and anyone who associated with them, were not just counter-revolutionaries and enemies of the communist revolution, but communist leaders and revolutionaries who had more knowledge of it than Stalin did. So people who deal in violence can oftentimes die in violence, and that definitely is the case of what happened to Robespierre. And eventually the committee is shut down. The French government has become extremely unstable, but at this time, interestingly enough, the First Republic's army is actually dealing significantly well, despite the domestic crisis, with foreign invasions, as Britain and Prussia and other places are trying to undermine France and take land from it, and the French continue to be successful, including an invasion of Italy in 1794, which ends successfully with a young officer who's risen to the rank of a general very fast, defeating the Italians and subjugating them, and that man is Napoleon Bonaparte. And by the end of the decade, he has actually commandeered the revolution. Napoleon always believed that he was at the heart of the French Revolution and that he promoted the French revolutionary ideas, which he did, even through force, violence, and occupation, which is what characterized his time in power. He declares a consulate with himself as the French consul, and he basically becomes the dictator of France and takes over the Republic. Eventually, he's going to name himself emperor in 1804, and we all know how that ends. He tries to invade Russia. The invasion is not successful. He's booted from power, returns, and is finally vanquished at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. And at that point, the other European powers all intervene in the French government and decide to set up a constitutional monarchy in France with all the pomp and circumstance that Louis XVI had had before he had been thrown out of power and executed, but with a republic. Should I join Russia? I don't know if that's a smart idea. Although Russia has done very well in wars. They defeat Napoleon and his Grande Armée. He invades Russia actually with more than 500,000 men, and he's not able to subject them. And of course, they also, during World War II, defeated the Nazis. But how do I remember all this? I just love it and try to absorb as much of it as possible. So, meanwhile, Napoleon flees. He comes back. He's defeated. He's vanquished, and the French set up a republic with a constitutional monarchy to keep the monarchy. France they're actually told by the other European countries, this is the kind of government you have to have. Yes, France also freed Poland. Kind of. Are you referring to Napoleon? There's a lot of these. Poland's kind of been in flux in European history for a long time. So, anyways, that is not the first or only French Revolution, and a lot of people have argued and debated whether Napoleon actually belongs as part of the French Revolution, if he believes in the French Revolution, or if he's just a contradiction of the French Revolution. That's a common debate in history, and historians have written a lot about that. There are other French revolutions, one in 1830, and this is where the Paris communes are set up, and people actually set up barricades. And if you listen to the French national anthem, they say "to the barricades," referring to that. There is a revolution in 1848 which overthrows the French Republic that's working right then. I believe it's the Second Republic, and eventually a new French Empire is created by Napoleon's nephew, Napoleon III. And after he is defeated in the 1870s by the Germans, the Prussians, there is yet another French Revolution in which he is overthrown from power and the French Fourth Republic is created. So the French have had so many revolutions and so many republics established. This is currently the Fifth French Republic, and the first one obviously being this noble idea of individual liberties and things like that really went awry in violence and bloodshed, and eventually allowed a despot, Napoleon, to take over France. And so, yeah, there's been a lot of French revolutions, and there were a lot in a very short amount of time during the 1800s. And there were it was a lot of civil war, a lot of backfighting, a lot of undermining of the government. And now France today actually is dealing with a lot of political upheaval, although there doesn't really seem to be a Napoleon-like figure who's going to take over power there. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the French Revolution in my last live stream, and I'm glad I got around to it now. So someone was asking about Alcatraz. So Alcatraz is quite interesting. That's a very famous prison on an island in San Francisco, and I believe it was shut down in the 1960s. I actually visited Alcatraz when I was quite young, and Alcatraz actually, like I said, I believe it was shut down in the 1960s. And I believe the reason it was shut down, it was not considered humanitarian in the way it was treating its prisoners. It was not considered a good enough environment for its prisoners. Of course, Alcatraz is famous for being on an island, for being a maximum security prison, and for housing the likes of probably the most famous gangster of all time, Al Capone. And so basically it was shut down. It's like Sing Sing prison in New York that was shut down. I don't know about the TV series, but these prisons that were really in vogue and popular and draconian in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, by today's standards are kind of cruel and unusual, and so a lot of them have been shut down. And is it haunted? There are a lot of prisons that are reportedly haunted by the souls of dead inmates, and apparently My favorite, speaking of history, one of my favorite series when it was young, and it taught me a lot about history, was a show called Haunted History on History Channel, and it did two things for me. It got my history mind racing, but it also got my heart pumping. It was kind of scary, so that was quite interesting. Yeah, that's Alcatraz there. What else did I want to talk about history-wise? No, Sing Sing was a real prison in New York State where they executed people. One of the most famous serial killers of all time was executed in Sing Sing prison, Albert Fish, a pedophiliac, a pedophile, and a cannibal. It's a History Channel show called Haunted History. It's not on anymore, but you can probably look it up, and they've got full videos that you can find on YouTube where they just, invert the set design or the camera angles or things like that. It was a very interesting series. You might be even able to stream it if you rent it and stuff like that. So, yes. So I talked about that earlier in my live feed. One of the most interesting and unprecedented things happened today with Trump's. I don't know if it's too soon yet to call it an assassination attempt, but former President Trump campaigning in Pennsylvania was shot and had blood on his ear and on his face and was carried away. He is reportedly fine. The gunman is dead. There was a person shot who was in critical condition, and my lamp, I don't know about that. But anyways, so there is so the former president seems to be okay in the sense that he is not going to be there's not serious wounding, but the gunman is dead, someone else is dead, and a third person is in critical condition. So just obviously a terrible thing. Like I mentioned, are you serious that CNN actually posted that? I'm from the United States. So do I think Trump has a third year? No. I don't give out my name. I'm the Friendly Neighborhood Historian. Well, actually, you are all the Friendly Neighborhood Historians. I'm just the facilitator of the Friendly Neighborhood History. And again, if you like this content, feel free to subscribe. I put out daily shorts and things like that, and doing at least once a week a fuller length video. Like I said, one is dropping tomorrow. Really appreciate all of the support and feedback I get from this channel. But anyways, so it's a time of great polarization and division in our country, and both sides now are calling for peace and civility, something that I think we desperately need, and it could get a lot worse. It's been worse at different times in our country. Do I think Trump has a third year? About that, are we recording? Okay, I don't know what's happening here. Alright, I don't know if we're recording or not, but I think I'm going to have to stop recording and then start it again.